warning, trigger warning. If you're not subscribed and you haven't liked this video, you're stupid. What are you doing, you stupid person? Okay, alright. Now that the trigger warning's over, we can go into the easy stuff. This is politics and religion. Let me preface this video with sharing my bias and sharing where I'm coming from so that you can understand, oh, well, the reason that he may think this is because he's a young little piece of crap. I am a young adult, white male. I am a Christian. I lean left on the political compass. And I think that Joe should have definitely won the presidency. By Joe, I mean Joe Mama. This is me. This is where I'm coming from. I'm Kirby Groves. I'm all of those things that I just listed. There is great discussion happening levels and levels and levels above me that I can hardly throw my hat into the ring. I mean, not even. I can't even touch people who are just geniuses in the field of discussing politics and religion and the tough stuff. What I'm gonna get at in this video is pretty much only pertains to my experience. My circles are predominantly white and predominantly young, and really does span both sides of the political discussion. What I'm getting at here in this video is not the entire political discussion. I'm not solving it for everybody because everybody is unique and has a different experience. I'm not Bruno, okay? I can't solve the, Israeli-Palestinian conflict like that, What I'm speaking to is on an individual level. When I'm at the dinner table and I am trying to have a civil discussion with somebody who doesn't agree with me. The idea of this video is to head towards constructiveness. How can we posture ourselves to think constructively in a conversation? I think these are really, really, really important conversations. I think they're some of the most important conversations, and to avoid them entirely is very immature to me. I think to have a thought process on things like this, like politics and religion, are pretty integral to being a human being. This idea, or what I'm gonna get at here, really applies to hopefully not just politics, but like discussions and debates as a whole. What are we gonna have for lunch, and why do I want this and you not want it, right? So that's a tough one. That one may be even tougher than politics. What I'm really trying to figure out is how to operate among others, as a human being, and how to do that. And I think that starts with perspective. To me, perspective is the baseline to where the entire conversation will go and will end up, right? If somebody doesn't understand the idea of perspective, your conversation will run into a wall where you disagree and it is impossible to cross any sort of barrier. It's really surprising to me how many people don't quite get what specific type of perspective I'm talking about. It doesn't necessarily mean just seeing what another person sees. That's a big part of it, but that's not the whole of it. That's not the whole of it. This isn't a shots fired at anybody I've had a discussion with that went nowhere, because that happens. This is more of an explanation of where I'm coming from, as far as my understanding of what it means to hold a belief and to have another person hold a belief, and how I interact with that idea. Hopefully the discussion can continue from that point. Perspective is understanding where another person's coming from, looking at their experience and looking at what they know and where they've, come from and all the good stuff and that. To put yourself in another person's shoes. That's not a new idea. Everybody gets that. For somebody to have a different perspective than you really means for you to be able to allow that to happen. The best way that I can explain this is religiously. I'm thinking biblically. This is huge in circles that debate over Bible interpretations and things like that. It's the way that you hold how you interpret the Bible. I may believe that there's a biblical interpretation to allow swearing. A different person may come to a different conclusion on the biblical interpretation of swearing and say, no, you can't do that. That's bad. We have two people with two different ideas. Where does discussion go from there? You can debate on the idea, or you can debate on the text specifically of swearing, and it can go somewhere, but really it goes nowhere, because nobody wants to change. What both people would have to do in this case, and especially to the person who doesn't believe in the interpretation of swearing as okay, mostly because that's pretty common in Christian circles, they both have the opportunity to look at each other and say, I believe this and you believe that, and I may be wrong. I might be totally off on what it means to interpret this specific idea. You do this differently than me, and that is okay. For you to have this belief alongside me having this belief, I know I'm right, and I know you're wrong, and you know you're right, and you know I'm wrong. The best place we can go from there is I might be wrong, and you might be wrong, and high five. Good discussion. Now we can come at this discussion in a very, very constructive way, because we can allow each other to have our interpretations believe, have perspective. Yay. Go team. Hooray. Wait a minute. So you can just allow perspective. You can just allow people to have perspective. Terrorist groups have their own perspective. ISIS has their own perspective. I talked about this a lot when I was talking with Bell on that podcast, so if you want to see that, you can check that out. ISIS thinks that they are doing the work of God and killing people. And let's say we get in a discussion with ISIS and say, oh, well, you know, I have my beliefs and you have your beliefs, but, you know, let's look at this constructively, right? Let's look at this, you know. No, there's a separate set of things that I think go beyond the discussion or idea of perspective, and I think they all share a common theme. To me, that theme is the exertion of power over another. Black Lives Matter, unborn children, pregnant women, women in general, deportation of Latino and Hispanic citizens, and probably a lot more. I mean, definitely a lot more. Causes that go beyond the idea of have a perspective and sacrifice the potential livelihood or life of somebody who does not have the ability to stand up for themselves. Every single one of these discussions requires their own dissection and their own understanding, and it is fraught with complication when you step into the main part of politics. I think this is the central part of the discussion of perspective, because suddenly the idea of somebody having an opinion gets thrown out the window. So now, with all of this in mind, with all of this tumultuous back and forthness, how do we enter the political discussion when we sit down at the dinner table? This is where the idea of me not getting at the entire political discussion plays into the story here. I don't have an answer. I don't have a definitive answer for the entire political back and forth. That's not what I'm trying to get at either. That's not what I know. I have my own understanding of my thought process behind each and every one of those topics that I listed before. I have my own understanding of perspective. I think that's a really important thing to have for me, especially with another person that I may know who is also a person and has their own opinions. Let's bring it back from the entire political discussion down to I'm standing across from my friend or family member who has a different opinion than I do, and where do I go from here? The powers that be are on either side, crunching on both of our shoulders. You remember when people were like backing North and South Korea, and they were being equipped to just demolish each other with their giant nuclear weapons that they were given from bigger powers? That's what I like in the political discussion too, when it's just me, and it's just another guy, or girl, and I know what I know, and they know what they know. How do we talk to each other politically and constructively? There's a big back and forth with the Republican-Democrat party. Wow. What a revelation. Both are equipped with this nuclear power of human rights versus like economic rights versus, you get the idea. Here's what I see going back and forth most of the time. I think Republicans get the short end of the stick. Those who lean right find themselves on the opposite end of human rights discussions, which is very interesting to me. Those who lean right are dubbed culturally to be on the opposite side of what it means to have perspective. Those on the Democratic side will have understanding on Black Lives Matter and human rights issues and be shouting for the sake of human rights against people who will not listen to them. Return to the Republican side and suddenly you are an insane person because you lean Republican. Because you lean right, you are crazy and not a perspective-driven person. Those on the right are completely shut down for having an opinion against the umbrella of human rights under the dubbed term human rights for the left party, implying that you have no human rights, you have no perspective on that, thus, blah. In a lot of cases, there are people who are legitimately racist. In a lot of cases, there are those on the right who do not have perspective. In a lot of cases, there are those on the left who virtue signal like crazy and have a false sense of perspective. And then there are people that I know that are somewhere in the middle. Contrary to what the media exposes and to what the internet stirs up, I have friends who are Republican or lean right and are not Alex Jones crazy, who have a good head on their shoulders. Contrary to what the media exposes and the internet brings up, I have people that I know, friends of mine, who are on the left, who also are not trying to do a whole alt-left takeover thing. People who are caught in the middle of this, who I know have nuance. I'm speaking to you. I know you. And I love you, and we are much more alike than anybody would assume that we are. We're in a situation where both sides are pointing out each other's flaws, and then saying, you won't listen to me. You won't listen to me. And thoughtful people that I know, hopefully including myself, are in the middle, just trying to be human. Can I reiterate? I definitely 100% need to reiterate that this is in my circles. This is in my predominantly white, amateur discussion circles. This is not about people in circles who are having high political discussion. This is not about people in circles who are black and are being shot for their skin color. This is about the subsection of people that I know who feel lost in the tense grandeur of the political discussion. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be right. To my Republican and Democratic friends, listen more. It takes being wrong to have understanding. This is Editing Kirby. Wow, what does it mean to talk? Goodness, holy cow. This is Editing Kirby checking in. I want to emphasize and reiterate a point that I think may have flown under the radar. I'm not trying to say that having a neutral view on politics as a whole makes you smarter. On the contrary, I actually think that having no opinion for the sake of being an agreeable person is completely missing the point of political discussion. Get yourself an opinion. Think about things deeply. I have one. I land somewhere on this compass. But when you're in a conversation where neither of you understand where you're coming from, try to understand where each other are coming from. And that involves you listening and me listening. You as a general term, as in people. So, okay, that's all I want to say. I want to make that clear. A couple added bonuses, a couple side notes that I wrote down here that I think are equally as important if you're kind of in this little mix that I've described, this little subsection of people who are kind of lost in the sauce. I don't think you can have constructive criticism online. That doesn't mean you can't be vocal. I don't think virtue signaling is the answer personally. I think that this is about something bigger than what you want to be seen as. Understand that people believing in something means that they're in a social circle, and change means for them to leave that social circle. The cost of changing their opinions is to change their people. So keep that in mind in discussions of politics and religion and all that, all the good stuff. They are, and you are, solidified in who you know and what you know. There are people who will not try to truly listen or explain. That's gonna happen. How you handle that is a completely different topic. I think the best course of action to somebody who doesn't care to listen is to listen. You'll get so much more out of that conversation if you listen than if you try to interject. And lastly, I'm probably and likely totally off on what it means to have perspective, on what it means to have understanding for whoever. What I'm trying to get at is that we all have reasons for doing things, whether they're good or bad. To look at the reason and not the things that people do feels more good-er to me. Alright, I hope that didn't